Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the June 14th meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority to order. It's 9:03 a.m. Raymond, can you do roll call and then advise us whether or not there are any public comments, please?
Yes, ma'am. No public comments, and we'll go through roll call. Ms. Wilson?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Bird?
Here.
Mr. Reyes?
Here.
Ms. Bettis? We've heard from Ms. Enriquez and Ms. Stevens that they will not be attending today.
Okay.
We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. So then the second item for the morning is the adoption of the minutes of the board meeting of May 12th, 2023. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
Move to approve.
I have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 3, discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the execution of amendments to the following instruments as they relate to the Darrington Road Improvements Project. A, interlocal agreement with the town of Horizon City, and B, work authorization number 56 with Atkins North America, Inc.
Good morning. Raymond Tejas for the record. This item is read into the record, deals specifically with Darrington Road Improvements Project. As a reminder, this project is being designed and will be constructed by TxDOT for the town of Horizon City. What we are doing is we're supporting the project by managing the right-of-way acquisitions for the town of Horizon City. And what you see here before us is an amendment to the interlocal agreement that we entered into with them. The original interlocal identified the number of parcels and construction easements that we were to acquire. They've identified 2 additional easements. One is a temporary construction easement, and one is a permanent easement that they need at the intersection of Darrington and Horizon Boulevard. So that's what you see before you. The interlocal is under item 3A. That provides the funding and the scope to allow us to do this work. And then item 3B is a work authorization amendment with Atkins North America to actually complete those services. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I would recommend approval.
I have a question.
Ms.
On this,
Barr.
the temporary easement, is it actually going to be put up at the same time as the permanent one, or is the temporary one there for a short period of time, then the permanent one will be in the exact same place?
I believe they're different locations, but I'll ask Mr. Fino to chime in.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Edgar Fino with Atkins. So on the temporary, it's going to be while we're under construction. And then the permanent is going to be where the permanent controller, traffic signal controller is going to be installed. So it's 2 different locations. The temporary is where we have the existing controller and the signal pole, and then the permanent is going to be where the permanent controller is going to be installed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a more general question. One of the things I've noticed, like when we have our meetings, is anytime we have any kind of change to our agreements, we sort of have to amend the agreement in addition to the work authorization or increasing the budget. And I was just sort of curious as to why, if we're going to enter into like an interlocal with the town of Horizon for a project where we're doing acquisition or right-of-way acquisition, that it couldn't be a little more open-ended, that it's just all in any right-of-way acquisition associated with the project, so that we wouldn't constantly have to have us amend the agreement, and I'm assuming they have to amend the agreement too. I mean, it's 2 separate actions by 2 public bodies that require like a lot of work, I think, for something that's sort of kind of more routine, and that the focus could maybe just be on the work orders or increasing the budget or something like that. And I've noticed that on a lot of them, like the county ones and stuff. I mean, there may be a reason that, you know, the partner wants to keep them narrow, but I think if it might be worthwhile just asking if there's a way to kind of make it a little more open-ended, I mean, restricted to kind of the purpose of the agreement for a project or whatever, so that we don't have to do that all the time.
Understood, and I think the answer is what you mentioned. Usually the other side wants a more narrow agreement with a very specific amount and a very specific scope. But there are some, and in fact, there are whenever we get a request for additional services, the first thing that Robert and I do is look to the original interlocal to see if there is funds and see if the scope would allow it. So there are many of these that we don't actually bring to you because
Okay.
they're already covered. The only ones the ones that we have to bring is either the scope is completely outside of what was identified, or there's not enough funding.
Okay, that's fine. I was just, I mean, as someone who like looks at the time, you spend a lot of time and effort on things
Agreed.
that you don't necessarily need to do. I think if you started with a scope that was a little broader to begin with, but, and I know sometimes entities don't want to do that, but
Yes, ma'am.
I just think going forward, anytime we have an opportunity to kind of broaden the scope more so that we don't have to do multiple amendments, it would be in their best interest as well.
Agreed.
Okay,
And
thank
we'll
you.
we'll mention that.
All right.
I have a question. When it says interlocal, well, no, the work authorization number 56, is that 56 for this project or just in general?
That's the 56th work authorization that we've entered into with Atkins since we brought them on board many years ago. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
I second it.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Excuse me. Discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the execution of amendment to work authorization number 27.8 with Atkins North America for the Pelican Drive widening project.
Yes, on this item, this is an amendment with Atkins to address a safety issue that we've identified on the roadway. As you know, we're limited in what we can do on the roadway. One of the things we can do is deal with areas where we find safety issues. This particular one will add fee and scope to Atkins to add thermoplastic striping on the roadway. Originally, the original contractor put down some paint that has it's faded over the years, so we think it's important that we put this thermoplastic. It's high reflectivity, and it'll increase it's really a safety issue. So that's what you see before you. This is going to add a little over $21,000 to the work authorization with Atkins, who will manage this work. So I'd recommend approval.
Are there any questions?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Going forward, we have a presentation, update, and discussion on several projects and programs. The first, the Borderland Expressway Project. Second, the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. C, the 88th Texas Legislative Session, and then D, the Pelicano Drive Widening Project. We'll start with A, Borderland Expressway.
Yes, ma'am. Today we have Ms. Becky Reyes from TxDOT with us. She's going to walk us through the Borderland Expressway project. So, Ms. Reyes, thanks for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me. My name is Rebecca Reyes, and I am with the El Paso District, and I just wanted to give you a brief overview of our 3 phases of the Borderland Expressway project. So our first phase, as you know, we let it in April, and that one is going to start, our anticipated construction date is August of 2023. So this August, you will start seeing dirt moving for that one. The only thing right now we have is the right-of-way status. It's, we're working on a temporary construction easement with EPW, and that hasn't been signed, but we are working on it. We're anticipating that to be done prior to our August construction. So that one's fully funded. Then we have, if you, phase 2.
I
So-
have a question on
Sure.
the first. Is there a scheduled groundbreaking, a formal event for groundbreaking for that phase 1?
Not at this moment. Is that something that we want to pursue? I can definitely let them know. Did they promise that to you? Because I haven't heard anything about that yet.
I would very much like to see that pursued.
Okay. I will talk to our DE and our PIOs to try to see when that can happen.
Okay, thank you.
Usually we have them,
Take place at Railroad Drive and the site, whatever they're gonna start at, either Dyer or
Yeah, it'll be where the first construction site is going to be. And I believe it is railroad, but I'll verify that with our area office. And
Fairly substantial project for this area, probably one of the biggest ones since the border with the 375 corridor.
It's a pretty substantial project for the region, and it has significant, I think, impact in terms of mobility. And so it'll probably be really exciting for TxDOT to get some good publicity along with the coalition and a lot of other participants that were really strong advocates for it. And I think that's what Mr. Smith is kind of wanting to make sure that all the parties that helped to move this project along can at least kind of celebrate the fact that it's actually going to break ground.
Yeah, and I believe that's a good idea also, since it's going to be in the Northeast. You know, a lot of times the Northeast field will let out. So this would be definitely something that the community would like to know about, especially it's been so long in the works.
okay.
It's that proverbial journey of 1,000 steps. This is the first one.
Right?
You can't go back.
Yeah, once you start. And I think if they would like the RMA and the coalition to assist with that, I'm sure that we would be happy to do so.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I will definitely, and I'll let Raymond know, I'll email him
All right, thank you so much.
what they decide on that. We definitely do normally, I know they'll probably, once the project is completed, they'll do a grand opening type of ribbon cutting as well. But I will tell them that the coalition and the RMA requesting a groundbreaking, that think that would be a great public event, so.
Yes.
In
I'll
August,
take your request back to them, no
August probably
problem.
nobody's going to be excited to be out there doing it, but it's a big project.
We always like brisket and.
We are a state agency, we don't feed people, but I will let them know. Okay, so phase one, I have my marching orders, I'm happy to do that. Now we have phase two. We were disappointed that it did not get funded in the MTP, the 2024 MTP. We appreciate that you guys have put Borderland Expressway to the forefront and all the assistance with the coalition. So that was a little letdown. So currently we're still looking for funding unless like Raymond wants to fund the whole project. That would be awesome, but I'm not holding you to that. So on this, huh?
Bond it for you if you want to reimburse us later.
Pass through? I don't know if we
Yeah,
can.
ask them if they do that anymore, that would be good. Have there been any conversations about applying for federal funds for this portion?
Yes, we have, we've entertained maybe possibly doing a grant application for this, for one of the larger grants. We're just not ready with phase two yet. It's only at 60%, so we're hoping that maybe next year we could apply for federal grants. And we'll definitely be seeking your participation in that.
Is that why it wasn't funded for 24, because you're only at 60%?
No, actually, they decided to go on the FM 2185. They put that one as a priority because of one of the commissioners and because of the fracking and that whole process. They're gonna build FM 2185. That was the first priority from the commission, and then now
All right,
that was the biggest one funded.
okay.
And then there's not enough money, but we are looking for money for this one.
2185 is where?
It's, I'm trying to remember, it's like going out past Montana at the edge of our district, kind of. It's building a new, yeah. It's another county. It's, I want to say Brewster.
Brewster,
Goes off of 5410 Exchange in Van Horn.
Mm-hmm.
The 5410 Exchange in Van Horn, it looks like it goes northeast out of that.
And how much money is it?
Why are you asking me these difficult questions? I don't know. I'll have to get back to you. I think it's we had it originally gotten funded 10 million and then they made it whole. And I want to believe that the last estimate was about 100 million. And that's also to support, I think, the Blue Origin.
Oh, okay.
So that's where that's coming from. But,
If I could interject real quickly too, we have had conversations with TxDOT about pulling out a piece of Phase 2 and pursuing some funding from Congressman Gonzalez, who has showed an interest. So we've been talking to them about that. I think the 60% design, though, that's a bit of a hindrance for us because we really need that to be done before we can pull it out and then submit it as a, whatever the phrase is.
yeah, shovel ready.
Right, but the funding opportunity is formally known as earmarks, whatever the community programming, I forget the term for it. So we're looking at that as well.
So Phase 2, right now, again, we're at 60%. Well, we're anticipating to be 60% in July 2023. It's going to our district design review. The right-of-way maps are completed, and we are starting to get acquisition to begin soon. So we are prepping so that this one will be shovel-ready, and as soon as money becomes available, and if we decide to phase 2, I guess, if you want to pull out a piece, and maybe we could do sections of it, but we're still committed to get this project done. And then last is Phase 3. And that, again, will be at 60% along with Phase 2. And these maps, oh, I'm sorry. That was at 30%, sorry. And then the right-of-way status is still ongoing. So we're working on Phase 2. So Phase 2 will definitely be our next construction project. And then Phase 3, we're getting that one ready as well. It's kind of like the update, the broad overview of Borderland Expressway. But again, Marty did want me to come and let you guys know that we appreciate the coalition putting it at the forefront and all the political help you've provided for this project to be a priority for the El Paso district.
Thank
And
you.
We're committed to do that as well.
Good update. Did you have a question?
But I was just thinking,
Can you put your mic on?
I was just thinking, would it be a good idea to make this one of the projects we meet with New Mexico senators and, because, Buttigieg was through here.
Yeah, I think as soon as we get to the point where it's earmarkable, then I think we use Congressman Gonzalez and we form up kind of like
Okay.
a team with both states.
And we have heard from New Mexico, our counterparts in New Mexico, and that one is, the section that is, the part in New Mexico is fully funded, and they are moving forward with that one. So
Yeah, but
that is coming to
we're
fruition.
looking for help from,
I agree, but I'm,
Political help.
because our two aren't helping.
okay, well, I mean, Gonzalez is very interested in supporting what he can. So we are continuing to work with him and his staff and informing him on Borderland Expressway.
Okay, good.
But the bottom line is we got trumped by the space project, is that correct?
Yes, I'm
And
sorry.
oil, natural gas.
And FM 2185 is a little further along. I think they're at 90% and
Yeah,
almost
see that, I
ready
think
to.
some of it.
So I think once we become then, I mean, and then once we fund 2185, then we're the next up, I think is a good place to put us. And that, again, will happen when Phase 2 is going to be 60%, and they're anticipating, I think, 90% to be towards the end of the year. And that'll be, and at the same time, because we put it on our MTP and everything, we can continue and work with right-of-way to get all that acquisitions done. The better we are, I guess, to getting all of these things completed, the more likely we're to be funded next.
I have a question. When do we think this may be finished? How many years?
May be finished,
Maybe.
I mean, if we had all the funding, I mean, you would definitely see it completed probably within 10 years, but that's gonna be,
Okay.
it'll be transportation projects take a long time.
Right.
Just between construction and right-of-way and environmental, I mean, and then we'll have to reeval the environmental once we do fund it, if it's been too long from the environmental, but we continue to work and move forward. Transportation's a slow turtle race. It's not a hare race.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Thank you. So let's move to item B, the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan.
Yes, ma'am. Following past practice, this item has been provided to you all as backup. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Anything significant going on that we want to update for the public record?
Not really the outside of Pelicano, which
Okay.
we'll touch on here.
All right. Item C, the 88th Texas Legislative Session update.
So for this one, we have our outside counsel, Brian O'Reilly, available through Teams. He'll be speaking on the legislative update.
Good morning, Board. Brian O'Reilly, outside counsel with Lock Lord. So the legislature, sine die, the regular session wrapped up on May 29th. Currently in a special session on a limited call that really doesn't have anything that impacts the RMA. So not focusing on that too heavily. But we'll go over what happened in the regular session, which, I think I mentioned this the last time we talked, it was not much in the terms of transportation. This is, I think, my 10th legislative session working in this area, and really it is probably the most bland, in terms of transportation policy. There are a few important things that we're able to pass, but for the most part, not as much significant items to report. I'll talk about a few things with financing tools. Proposition 1, which was passed several years ago and transfers portions of the rainy day fund to TxDOT. It was set to expire in 2034, and the legislature passed a bill amending that. So now the expiration date will be 2042, and that's helpful for just overall transportation funding. In the budget this year, for the next two bienniums or 2 years, it's $6.87 billion of Proposition 1 funds will be going to TxDOT. So it's good to see that extension. Related, Proposition 7, which transfers sales and use taxes on motor vehicle sales to the State Highway Fund, that was also set to expire in 2032, and legislation was passed to extend it to 2042, and the governor has signed that on June 9th. And in the budget, there's $6.4 billion for the next 2 years going to TxDOT for those funds. So, all in all, that's almost about a little over $13 billion between those two items. It's now extended another 2 years. And just as an aside, TxDOT, their overall budget was, I think it was approximately $37 billion. So that's their total appropriation. And one more existing financing tool that kind of made some news that was adopted is there's going to be now a registration fee on electric vehicles. It's going to be $400 for a new vehicle and $200 for renewal annually. And so that's been something that's been in the works for a couple of sessions now. And so they were able to pass that. And so that will, again, go to TxDOT and provide some needed funding there. Some other items just related to some of your legislative priorities. There were a few bills filed, on ports of entry. Really nothing. The only thing that kind of passed that is somewhat related is there's a study bill that's going to have TxDOT perform a study on public safety and border security at the border crossings onto the state highway system, and seeing how to create safe and efficient commercial motor vehicle connectivity. So we'll keep an eye on that study as that happens in the interim. There was not much on public-private partnerships. In regard to the tramway, Texas Parks received funding for their capital construction portfolio, and that portfolio list included $10 million for the tramway. So there's that money should be earmarked for that project. And I've been communicating with Representative Ortega's office regarding that throughout the session. So those are, the high points of what passed. What didn't pass that that I know that you were following and that was important to the region is HB 78, which is the optional vehicle registration fee. It passed out of the House. It was amended to add Bexar County It moved over to the Senate and was never given a hearing. There really wasn't a lot of interest in passing it on that side of the aisle. And then relatedly, HB the 1379 by Representative Ortega. This is the deck park bill, allowing RMA to participate. It was voted out of the House committee in March and then never moved. It wasn't even set on the House calendar, so not a lot of appetite for that one as well. As we do each session, we'll draft a more comprehensive overview and provide it to you. It's going to have a lot of things regarding the Public Information Act and some contracting items. But, what I just mentioned is probably the highlights of the session. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
I have one question. What do they ultimately decide about annual vehicle inspections? Did they eliminate that?
They did, except for areas that are, and I think is it non-attainment areas that if you have, and I think El Paso may be in that area.
Yeah.
I can check for you, but the bill did pass that you're referring to, but they're just major areas. We'll have to continue doing it.
Okay, thanks.
There was a proposal for an additional $10.
The additional $10 on the vehicle registration fee.
It didn't pass?
It did not. The Senate, it passed out of the House, but it did not receive a hearing in the Senate.
Good.
But yet they did $400 on an EV registration?
That is correct.
That was insane. Why didn't they do it for everything? They could have made a ton of money.
Well, I think it was.
It had to do because it's not fossil fuel driven?
Well, I think, the policy behind it, obviously, they're not electric vehicles are not using the gas tax, and so therefore not paying into to their fair share of the degradation of the roadways. But I think they even had a hard enough time passing that. It took several sessions to get that one worked out.
Will they use that to do the charging stations? Is that the plan?
No, it's going to be treated the same as the other vehicle registration fees, and so which are subject to the constitutional limitation on just for public roadways. I think that the charging stations, a lot of that is coming from the federal infrastructure bill.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
I would point out that Texas's fee is one of the highest, if not the highest, in the country for electric vehicle registrations. It does make sense for electric vehicles to pay something as they're not participating in the gas tax, but the amount is well above what an average driver driving 12 or 15,000 miles would pay equivalent in gas tax, and so it is a bit regressive.
No, I mean, I'm kind of surprised because I've always felt like the registration was unduly low when you compared to other states in terms of funding roads and stuff. I mean, very low. So, okay.
Is there anything else?
On the legislative update? Okay, so we'll go into the Pelicano widening project. Do we want to go into an executive session on this one now?
Well, before we do that, I'd like to read a few things into the record for the public, for the benefit of the public, and then we can discuss those items in a little more detail in executive. So I'll touch on just a few distinct components of the project. Obviously, this is a very complicated project. The first one is financial, and this deals with some of the statements that have been made recently by the contractor. So I wanted to touch on how this works. Ultimately, the total contract amount to date with the original contract plus any change orders and that sort of thing is just over $22 million. The total amount of invoices that have been paid to date is just over $10 million. So we've got a remaining project fund of about $11.6 million. Now I'll note that there are invoices that have been submitted for the time period of July 2022 through November of 2022 submitted by the contractor. In the total amount of just over $215,000. However, those have not been paid because they're all missing something. They're missing forms, they're missing requirements that the feds, as a federally funded project, any contractor that submits an invoice has to submit, for example, proof of payment to subs and suppliers. They have to show proof that Buy America has been complied with. So there's forms with materials that are turned in. manufacturer certifications, hauling disposal site approvals. So these are some of the examples of the documents that are missing on the invoices that have been submitted by this contractor in that time period. And that's the reason that they haven't been paid, right? So it's important to note that because the contractor has been saying they've not been paid. This is why. We've been trying to help them for actually over a year now, trying to get them their paperwork completed, but we just haven't gotten there. So I just wanted to touch.
Can I ask a quick question before you go into another area? Have they provided that documentation in the past for other invoices for which they have been paid?
They have, but it's taken months and months to do that. So we've mapped out how long, when we get a completed invoice, actually I should rephrase that. Normally what would happen is we would get an invoice, it would be missing a whole slew of these documents. And many of them were, the primary ones were proof of payment to subs and suppliers. We were not getting those because the subs and suppliers were not being paid. And that's why we received notices of claims from subs and suppliers for non-payment. That's why the surety has made payments to subs and suppliers to date in excess of $500,000.
Okay.
So that's, so we helped them with that. In fact, we worked with TxDOT. We had a special exception for this particular contractor to advance a payment even though some of the subs and supplier confirmations had not been received. TxDOT allowed for that, for a grace period. And so it's just another example of us working with them and trying to get them paid. Their documentation is lacking on this side. So anyhow, that's on the financial side. So I just wanted to touch base on that very briefly. In terms of outreach, and obviously please stop me along the way if you have any questions. In terms of outreach, we'll be updating the web pages. As a reminder, we set up a specific web page for this particular project for the benefit of the public. So we will be updating that later this week. I will also be providing a written update to Commissioners Court later this week as well. So as a reminder, I present in person to the Commissioners Court each month, and in between my visits, I provide a written update to them as well. So that'll go out later this week. And then I'm presenting to Commissioners Court again on June 26th. So that's on outreach. In terms of the bankruptcy, there's been some developments, and we'll get into more detail on this in executive session. But for the benefit of the public, I'll mention a couple of things. The contractor has conceded to redesignating this bankruptcy from originally filed as a Chapter 11 Subchapter 5, which we've discussed in the past. Subchapter 5 is an expedited process for intended for smaller bankruptcies. There were objections from the U.S. trustee and the Subchapter 5 trustee saying that this bankruptcy is too large. It should not fit under a Subchapter 5. And they have conceded to that, so they've submitted an agreed order. It has now been converted into a normal Chapter 11, which is a little more onerous on the debtor. So that has happened. There was a hearing held on May 23rd for the surety who has submitted a motion to lift stay, and as we've discussed, motion that would get them out of the bankruptcy to file certain claims and that sort of thing. So there was a hearing held on the 23rd. The judge denied that motion, but required the contractor and the surety to get together to develop a motion and submit a motion to identify how the contractor could use revenues as they come in. So one of the complaints by the surety in that motion was that the contractor was generating revenue, but was using it without sharing any information to the surety, without sharing any of those revenues to the surety. Meanwhile, the surety has already made over $500,000 in payment claims and has no way of knowing where those revenues are going. So that was a complaint. The judge directed them to develop a motion of what they refer to it as a use of cash collateral. So that happened back on May 23rd. A hearing was held just yesterday regarding JAR's filed motion to authorize JAR's use of the cash collateral. Ultimately, after the hearing, the judge denied that motion, noting that it was missing certain requirements, and essentially said that the surety was free to refile its previous motion to lift stay. So that's an ongoing item that we'll be monitoring. We'll keep you apprised of. It was also revealed, and this I think is an important point, that JAR has been operating without general liability or equipment insurance for the last few weeks. And so the judge has required JAR to provide proof of insurance within 24 hours at the close of that hearing, which was yesterday. So that's an important note, I think. And then the last item we'll touch on is default. Because the sureties, the RMA's motion to lift stay was lifted, our attorneys have restarted discussions with the surety attorneys to see if how quickly we can get this project restarted. And in terms of JAR, we have restarted the default process with JAR as well. So that's a brief update for the benefit of the public, but I would like to discuss some of these items in a little more detail in executive session.
Now we're done with executive session, during the last council. I'd like to have a conversation about what we can and can't say publicly, because we think we need to have a more affirmative statement regarding the fact of the situation instead of, these articles popping up. And it looks like we're dealing with something.
We're running a local business out of business, and I think that's unfair to us as an organization. That's specifically why I asked about previous invoicing, because I think to the extent that we can, I'd like to have a public statement about the project budget, what's been paid, what's outstanding, and the reason they're outstanding. More important, that claims have been filed repeatedly by subs not being paid versus saying they're not being paid because of us.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything, if that's already public record, I don't know why we can't just have a factual narrative of our process, particularly the process as it relates to default. I mean, an entity like ours does not default a contractor unless everything else has been totally exhausted.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a very difficult, laborious process. It's not in anyone's best interest.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So yeah, I think we can do that. We can certainly put together a statement.
And then, I mean, so when we go into executive session, when we come out, I'd like to be able to have some kind of agreement from the board that we work with our attorney to issue a formal statement,
Yes, ma'am.
to the extent he says we can. Thank you. Okay.
So now we're ready?
Yes, ma'am.
The time is 9:40 a.m.
I'm sorry, can I get you to read that? The mic is off again.
I turned it off. The time is 9:40 a.m., June 14th, 2023, and the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board will now return to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071 for the purpose of consultation with our attorney. We will reconvene the open session upon conclusion of the executive session. I would like for Atkins to stay in the meeting in executive session with us, if that's okay. It is now 10:34 a.m. on June 14th, 2023. The RMA Board of Directors is reconvening its open session meeting after deliberations in executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071. The board consulted with its attorney, but took no action in executive session. There are no other items in the open session requiring discussion or action, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor? Aye. It's 10:35 a.m. Thank you all very much.